Right, folks, if you're joining us, give people a few minutes to join and get started. But want to thank everybody for their time today, whether you're here live or you're watching a recording. Ben and I are super excited to chat about security by design, building trust in AI services. So we'll give another minute or so before we get started. We entered the stream a little bit early in case we had some anxious folks getting in before the official 12 p.m. Eastern start. All right, folks, just another welcome for anybody that's joining us. We're going to get started in the next minute or so, but appreciate your time today. We'll try to make this interactive as well. We have a few poll questions. I really want to encourage people to use the comments. Cool thing about LinkedIn is if you're watching this a little bit later, you can still post comments at any time, and promise you that Ben and I will be monitoring those comments, and we'll get you answers as just about as quickly as we can. All right, folks. So let's get started. As I said, I want to welcome everybody to Security by Design, building trust in AI services. Before we get started, Ben and I want to do quick intros. I'm Mark Baldino. I'm one of the two co-founders of Fuzzy Math, and my fellow co-founder is Ben, who's here as well. I've been in design for 25 years. And during that time, I've been working in consultancies. I've worked in-house at enterprise agencies. And for the past 16 and a half, Ben and I have been running Fuzzy Math. And I'll give you a little bit more intro on Fuzzy Math, but let Ben introduce himself as well.
Yeah, the other half with Mark, got my start in startups in the dot-com boom in the late 90s and kind of fell in love with designing software and problem solving and just solving problems for websites. Degree in computer science, and then moved away from back-end development into design about 22 years ago, and have been working with Mark for the last 18.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. All right, folks. So again, thank you for joining us. I mentioned if you joined us kind of early that the idea here is to make this interactive. So if you have any questions, please use the comments, and that could be whether you're watching it live now on LinkedIn or YouTube, or whether you're watching a recording of it. But a bit about Fuzzy Math. So we are born and bred a user experience design consultancy. So that's all we do is product strategy and design day in and day out. We primarily work in the enterprise and B2B space. I think we kind of see our mission or vision is really bringing consumer grade design to business applications. Because we have this not even working assumption, but our history has told us that when customers of our businesses or users, in our case for digital product design, are happier, that generally translates into business success. So we really do want to focus on those as well. I don't have to go through all of this. We're a global firm. We have offices in Chicago and Toronto. We are primarily based out of the Chicago office. From kind of a service offering perspective, we do a lot of organizational design and team training, even on AI and how to use AI in your design practice, but also things like accessibility. We just help teams, internal UX and product teams, get more traction in their organization. And then we do the end-to-end UI UX delivery. Where we're spending a lot of our time these days is in two areas. One is data-driven design. in ensuring that teams have the data that they need to make impactful design choices that translate up to business success. And then AI-enabled products. So we're helping a lot of our clients integrate AI into their service offerings. And I would say this is kind of an enormous shift over the past 18 months. We weren't early to AI, and we didn't rebrand ourselves the AI UX company. But all of our clients now, every client engagement we have right now has some level of integrating AI into their product. So it's been a pretty big shift. And I'll explain what that's meant and why we developed these heuristics. But really, how do we use AI at Fuzzy Math? There's kind of 4 different ways. They overlap, right? There's a kind of a blend between them. The first is like, okay, we're going to take the human-centered or user-centered design process, and we're going to, in all cases, use AI to enhance that process. So we see it. I think Microsoft's got the best name, Copilot. We see it as a co-pilot. It's a partner in the process. We use it for research synthesis, not generating journey maps, but using journey maps and the research we've done and personas to help identify pain points and areas for opportunity, which switches right into idea generation. So how can we use it? If people are using the double diamond, there's areas where we want to go wide, and there's areas where we want to narrow. We find that in idea generation, AI is really powerful in helping teams go wide. Then testing and iteration. So this can be scenario modeling, heuristic reviews. We haven't quite got to sending it designs and asking for feedback, but we actually do have a client right now where we're building an app where we can try to get some initial feedback through AI. And again, we're just trying to model this and then compare it to live users and see what the results are. And then internal operations. I mean, we use AI every day. Our team, we have an internal initiative where roughly 10% of employees' internal time of their time, part of their internal time is spent exploring AI. And then we help our clients. How can they use AI in their internal processes to be more efficient and to move a little faster? So why are we talking about trust in AI? Well, it is really a bit of a crisis. Obviously, I've just talked about AI shaping how we work, how we deliver products, how we build things. Probably came really early for code and people who write for a living. It's now here for designers, folks. If you're a designer on this call and you haven't had somebody give you an AI generated UI and say, what do you think about this? Wait a month. It's going to happen. It happens all the time. And that's okay. We have to be ready for it. We work in enterprise and B2B and in regulated environments. And in those cases, security is really, really important. So this trust and security is of the utmost importance. So what we call this security by design is because you need to be intentional about building trust. And in building trust, you're creating kind of a secure environment for your users. And so what we'll talk about today is how to build trust from the early phases of a process, research and discovery, all the way through delivery and governance. But, there's we've cited all the reports are at the bottom. But in this case, global CX market is estimated to grow. This is by 2030. This is an enormous shift, but it's a decent period of time. But in these days, it's not that long, right? We're in 2025. We're soon to be 2026. This is going to grow, and trust in those digital products is currency. And given, if you take one half of that, which is AI, and the other half of that is trust, and you have a misalignment there, you're going to lose in that digital currency. And so as you're delivering, whether you're in product or design, and you're delivering AI enhanced features or full AI delivered products, you got to believe in that currency and you have to build that currency. And so it's really what we're going to talk about today is building trust in those products and services. Okay, so some goals, these aren't necessarily in order, but we want to cover them. One of them is to be practical. Ben and I are always preaching that we are a practical, pragmatic firm. And we believe in doing reports or putting heuristics out that people can use. And so we want this to be a practical toolkit. We think it's applicable for anybody that works in the delivery of digital products and services, design, product, engineering, QA. We think it's actionable and it's based around trust. These are tangible steps your team can take tomorrow, maybe after this call, to help build better, more trusting AI-powered products. We've developed 11 heuristics. I'll cover those at a high level, and we're going to cover, I think, 9 or 10 of them. But as a giveaway at the end here, folks will get a copy of our heuristics, and we'll talk in a minute about how to actually use those heuristics. And we want to talk about business impact. At the end of the day, design has and will continue to have a role in the business outcomes, and designers need to align themselves with business outcomes. It's trite maybe to say we want to see at the table, or you have to speak the language of business. But I think if you take data sort of enabled or data driven design, that has to have a connection up to business analytics. And we know that building trust in applications, or the lack of trusted applications, can have an impact on the top and bottom line. So those are our session goals. So what's the enterprise AI reality? This is a recent study that made the rounds from MIT, and it was really, I think, it was stark, which was there's a gap between the AI investment and the actual outcomes. And we firmly believe that if you aren't, that one of those core components is kind of the trust component in making them successful. So 75% of organizations are using AI. 83 expect to expand that, and 35% are fully integrated, sort of successfully enabled. But the pilot rate, the enterprise AI pilot rate, failure rate is 95%. So look at the investment on the top and the fact that they're going to increase this, and then see that only 5% of these are being successful. Now, I would say at the outset, I don't think everything in design needs to be successful, right? I do think design and prototypes, it's about failure. The good thing about AI is you can test and repeat. But if people are investing in these pilots, they need to make them more successful. And in this report that came out, there is a component of building trust, and what that is delivering AI-enabled products and services that are aligned with user needs, and that are building trust along the way. And then when you fail to incorporate some of those components, your pilot could fail. So why do they fail, and kind of what's the outcome? Well, they're going to fail from low user adoption, people not using them. Even if you're working in a regulated industry, maybe it's mandatory use software in business, you're still going to add new features, and you get people to adopt these features and trust that the AI and the output that's being created is trustworthy. If there's confusion, a lot of people are in support centers trying to replace humans with chatbots. We've all dealt with Gen AI or chatbots that haven't quite met the mark, and they actually cause more problems than not. Obviously, trust and brand stability are linked. And when there's a perception that what you're delivering as a product doesn't work or is untrustworthy, that creates brand erosion. And I think all of these things, if you're in a SaaS-based tool and you're looking at important markers like top line revenue and user churn, you're going to have folks who are coming into the market faster, and are maybe able to steal some of that business and regretfully increase your churn. Just want to take a quick pause. If anybody has questions, again, please use the comment section. We'll be monitoring them and happy to answer as we go. We'll also have some time at the end for questions. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on Fuzzy Math's process, but it does help us frame how we're going to talk about these heuristics. So the first is discover. It's really taking people, sorry for the play on the name, from kind of a fuzzy state of understanding to an alignment. It begins with business alignment, business KPIs and goals, and what are the goals and metrics that we can track from a design and product perspective that are going to track up to those. So it's really about aligning, and then obviously performing things like primary and secondary research, qualitative and quantitative research to build a base of who the users are. And then the next component is sort of the design of things. So this is actually, let's make visuals. Let's create the reality of this product. I think designers are uniquely positioned to have an understanding of business requirements, users, and then they have a skill set that can actually build the UI. They can visualize it. And that's really, really powerful. And so there's a core component that as you're designing, and this is the largest set of the heuristics, is that while you're designing your tools, you need to pay attention to sort of trust and credibility. And then we'll handle deliver and drive as one phase, because they're not as broken out as we're talking about the heuristics, but it's really about bringing those things to life and monitoring that success post delivery. Okay, so this is the heuristic framework that we have. I would like to say that the image on the right is actually the full set of 11 heuristics and a little bit about how we develop those. And then this sample card on the left, I just explained because you're going to see these cards a lot. But so maybe some people don't even know what heuristics are, and just think of them as best practices. They're a little less rigid than sort of standards, which I think is especially useful when you're talking about AI. We're not talking about like WCAG accessibility standards where you're checking a lot of boxes. There are a series of questions you want to ask to see if your product or the feature you're delivering meets the benchmark or the best practice to deliver a trustworthy AI experience. So kind of think of them, and maybe people have used them from a usability perspective. We wanted to build some just around sort of trust and credibility that exists within AI. And these sheet and this set of heuristics is really to help product and product leaders, designers, and engineers evaluate maybe something they've just released to identify some areas that they could improve. But it's also proactive. It's not a trailing indicator of what have we done in the past. It can be a leading indicator of how to develop those tools. And we encourage people to use this framework. It's divided by phase. Blue is discover, the orangish red is design, and the purple is drive and deliver. And so use it during those various states of your product design and development process. And where did they come from? The past 24 months. Of our work, we have developed these heuristics, drawing on our client work, drawing on industry best practices, and then validating that they are effective. And so each one has a number and a phase, and then a title, and then there's a series of questions, and that's really what you want to utilize, that you would ask. And then as you go through those questions, give yourself a rating, or give this feature a rating. Did we meet the criteria, not meet the criteria? Does it meet it? We try not to make this too rigid or too many numbers because it's really just to get a scorecard and say, hey, 7 of these things failed. We got some work to do here and there. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ben, who's going to cover the first set of discover phase heuristics.
Yeah, we have 3 heuristics in this phase. These are the high-level view of the heuristics, and I'll go through each one individually and give some examples of how we use them and how we use them with our clients. Before going into the heuristics, we have a quick poll for you. And here it is. How aligned are your product design and engineering teams on incorporating AI into your product strategy? Take a look at the answers, drop a comment into the chat for us, and it's also in the comments already for you as we move forward and talk about each of these heuristics. But we're curious to see how you're doing today already. The first heuristic we have is the organization is aligned in how AI can best solve user problems. Some questions we have to ask yourselves, questions that we ask ourselves. Has the problem AI is meant to solve been validated through user research? As a firm that does user-centered design, we sure hope so, but maybe it's not always the case. We're using personas, scenarios, journey maps, really understanding the touch points of where humans and software fit together, where an AI-enhanced feature is coming together. We're even using AI these days to help this process along, as Mark was saying earlier. We could use generated journey maps, we can use personas, we can do Q&A with personas to really understand how they're going to work through flows. But generally making sure that the user research is done before any AI-enhanced features are released. Do product design and engineering teams agree on the role that AI should play? Workshops, ideally everybody's looking at the same design created reports coming out of research, making sure that the touch points of users and the use cases where AI comes into play is really well aligned across the team before anything is committed to and anything is built. Is there a shared understanding of the risks and limitations of applying AI in this context? Again, it's really getting everybody on the same page. A lot of what we're doing here is road showing some of our concepts of saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if it worked like this? Coming out of research, we have some ideas. Wouldn't it be cool if this was the future? And getting the engineering team to look at that and saying, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? And just really making sure that everybody's on the same page for what the vision is for the future and how the AI enhanced feature will kind of come into play. A lot of times we try to solve those what if questions ourselves of, what if this happens and we have an idea for the future. But bringing in the right folks with the right points of view really changes kind of the questions and changes those what if scenarios to really get a holistic view of what could happen and making sure there's real alignment from the get-go of where we're going with AI enhancement. A second heuristic, recommended AI features are tied to key business objectives. We try to learn our client KPIs as early as possible in an engagement, ideally before an engagement starts, so we kind of know where we're driving towards. On a recent engagement, the driving factor, because it was a differentiator for their industry, was every feature we release has to be tangentially related, if not directly related to AI. That was pretty simple. So when we get to how will success be measured here, it was really a binary, it involves AI or it doesn't involve AI. A lot of times it's not that clear. There's a little bit more that needs to go in to really understand what success looks like. We have other engagements in the AI space that are reduction in human hours for low value, tedious tasks. We have the success metrics of agentic workflows, like moving through the process and getting to a success on their own. It could be how much trust do users have, the human users have in this process, before and after the AI enhancements released. But really, how will success be measured is a great place to start, and then you work your way through the process. So some trade-offs. What are trade-offs for investing and prioritizing this feature over others? Another example from a recent project is a tool that had a lot of quick to do tasks, but there were many, many, many of them, versus every once in a while there'd be a massive task that took a really long time. And we had this idea of how we could use AI to help prioritize and build a package of this is what your day should look like, or this is what your week should look like, given all the tasks assigned to you. Everybody loved the idea, but then we get to the point of working with the engineering team and the product team of where to prioritize it. And it didn't make it into this release because it would take so many human hours to build. Same thing as a non-AI feature that I'm sure we're all familiar with. But really having those conversations up front and early with AI enhanced features is critically important.
I thought of a question as you were talking, Ben, and so I'll wait till the end. We'll have time for other questions from folks. But this concept of measurement, it sounds like in this case, our client came in with some ideas, and I think sometimes people struggle a little bit getting measurables out. And so if we have time, I'd love to kind of cover that and just sort of see what are some tips to try to draw out those measurables that you could connect to the AI.
All right. I think we skipped one. Our third and final heuristic in the discover phase is there's accurate data sources with clear processes in place for managing and maintaining them. AI is a little bit different than I think, what I think of as before AI, where some of this is a little out of our control. So what data will the AI need to access and where is it coming from? We're working with a client on a natural language processing search that's very powerful, AI powered, that you can create invoices, you can create reports, you can ask for help documentation. And so when we're thinking through this process, we had to kind of, as the design team, had to come in and say, well, we know you have this, this, and this, and that's where we think this data is coming from. And then we go down the process of, is it accessible to the second bullet point? Are there gaps and limitations? A lot of the ideas were like, oh yeah, we can use the existing support documentation to explain how features work. But there were gaps, and just going through those questions with the engineering team to make sure that everybody was on the same page of where the data was coming from, and that if we were sending agents out, that this data was always going to be there. What if something changed? What if a model changed? Really thinking through what could possibly happen. Is the data representative of the user base and diverse enough to prevent bias? Like, are all the users going to have the experience they expect and need from the data that we have available? All this rolls into that trust component. Another client had this example of, before we were involved, before AI was involved, there's a lot of calculated data in their platform. And so trust was an issue of like, is this actually correct? Once we were involved in suggesting some AI enhancements, the healthy level of skepticism from the user base of saying, can I actually trust this data? And we came to the conclusion of like, we just had to show the work. The AI had to be able to show their work to say, this is the data source. These are the calculations I'm providing. And here's the output. And we hid it all behind the little tiny eye in a circle icon, and validated it, did our research, did our due diligence to make sure that it was actually worked and people would trust it. But all of these are really good questions of asking about data, and just making sure that when these AI agents kind of go out and interact with the world and interact with the data, thinking through what happens if something changes. So insights from this phase, it's really alignment. It's making sure that everybody's aligned of what the critical issues are for the users, how those align to business value. The engineering, product, and design teams are all on the same page for the AI touch points and where they're going to be, and how they're going to work. They're going to validate before you move forward, and really understand that big picture. People think this is critical. There's a huge amount of strategic value. Fewer people are actually measuring it, and then even fewer are tracking the strategic value over time and after the fact. But I think one of the recent conversation I had with a key contact as client was all about, hey, how are those new features that we're designing working for you in the sales process? Something I learned really early in my career of how important the sales team is when getting alignment internally for the designs we're working on, where we're designing for end users, but the sales team, the engineering team, the product team, all critically important to make sure that we're aligned from the get-go, so that we have high numbers across the board here. And some best practices. So this is just kind of how Fuzzy Math thinks through best practices in the discover phase. We're never sharing raw data with an AI that is personally identifiable. We sanitize their data. We make sure we have explicit approval from our clients to use AI with data. I think that's the same level of trust that we would expect our the users to have and expect of the tool they're using. Using AI when we can, using controlled prompts. So trying to set up templates, making sure that different designers or different teams that are working on the same product are using templates to kind of set the same foundation or have the same scope of interacting with AI. So we can all start from the same scenarios, same personas, and then get similar answers when we get AI kind of put back out to us. Human validation, everything that goes into AI should be read word for word by a human being before it goes somewhere else, a report, a deck, into a product, things like that. But maybe making sure that humans are always in the loop, especially at critical points, and that you're kind of controlling the scope and the ecosystem of AI use.
Awesome. Last one is so important, and I do feel like our clients are aware of that, but it is really, really, really important to make sure that humans are in the loop, especially in the early stages of your discovery and integration of AI-enabled features. Okay, so let's move into the design phase heuristics. I think I'm only going to cover 4 of these. That's fine. You'll get the full list. But this is really, we're moving from discovery, we're getting into design. What do we need to pay attention to as we move through the design phase? And it's probably iterative, right? We all know design's iterative. So you might be looping back to these and continually checking these out. But we have a second poll we'll post in the chat. So this is really around your customers. And again, to the best of your knowledge, how would your customers, or how would you describe your customers' current sentiment towards AI? And obviously there's a scale here from resistant to skeptical to curious to open-minded, optimistic, or like, let's go. And I think sometimes there's a disconnect between the folks that are making business decisions and how they perceive customers and actual customers. So maybe as you're coming out of or still in research and you're coming into design, having an understanding of where they are can be beneficial. So let us know if you have any thoughts there. The first 2 heuristics I'm going to kind of cover one at once around one sort of theme. But the first is, the design clearly communicates what the AI is doing, why it's doing it, and its level of certainty in doing it. And I think all 3 of those are really, really important. Then AI supports and enhances users through this, enhances user decision-making through automation while retaining the user's sense of control. So what is this? This is really around transparency and being clear. I don't have this big of a brain as Ben, so I actually have my cheat sheet notes off to the side. So just, you can follow along in those notes if you want. And my client examples come at the end, and actually a lot are based on the work that Ben and his projects. I should note, like, Ben and I have been doing this for 20, 25 years. We're business owners, but we're also designers at heart, and we're on these projects where we lead every project between the two of us from an account perspective. And so we're seeing this stuff firsthand. So we just develop these off in the wild. We sort of worked with our team to develop them and our clients to develop them. But really, like, we firmly believe in transparency, but we know from putting prototypes together and getting validation that that users care about it as well. And especially early on, extra human in the loop, as I referenced, is really, really important because now if we moved from more prompt and response chat to agentic tasks and workflows, multiple agents working together, multiple agents working on multiple processes together, we have to keep those things, we have to provide feedback. And that's about being clear what's happening. Does it provide that in plain language? Do you showing the confidence level in the data? If you were first run experience, first time you use chat, go back and remember what that felt, a chat GPT or a Gen AI tool. Like, what did that feel like? And how much did you trust that first set of responses? It was probably pretty low. And then you checked it and came back to you with something of like, oh, I actually trust this a little bit more. Now, let's say you're going to use a tool like V0 and you're going to actually give it information, get a prototype out of it. You're going to get UI out of it. Now imagine you're a business user and you're designing a SaaS-based accounting platform, and you're going to want to know the input and output because you're maybe an accountant and you need to validate that. But think about that first-time user. And then where's the data coming from? And where's the supporting material? Are you citing those resources? Where's that data going to be stored? It's really about enhancing decision-making. Are the suggestions framed as by optional, by default, or are they forced upon people? Can you opt in early on? Can I opt out at some point? Like, the amount of UI clutter that's added to tools to introduce AI is more overwhelming sometimes than the AI itself. So if I get this first run and said, do you want to do this process, but you want to use AI for it? Great. And then all of a sudden it adds all of this stuff. Can I get rid of it if I need to move forward? And as we talked about, human oversight is critical in these workflows, approvals, risk-sensitive tasks. So keeping that. So these two heuristics kind of work together in terms of transparency and being clear. And the next one is still in the design phase. AI supports and enhances user decision-making through automation while retaining user sense of control. So I think you're seeing a theme here, which is human agency. We talk a lot about agency of machines, and I like to joke and say robots, but it's really of these agentic AI tools. As I said, I covered this 2.2 before, but this is really about agency, which is users don't want to lose full control. They want to know how to incorporate AI, and they want to not feel forced to it. So how do you make AI feel as though it's an add-on as opposed to the only way to accomplish a task? It is truly a partner. And when it's truly optional, as I said, can you sort of opt in and opt out of that experience? So it's really about maintaining control and being very, very transparent in the process. And then kind of moving into 2.1 and 2.4, is the AI communicating exactly what it's doing, and then the users feel safe when they're interacting with the data. And so this is really about consistency, right? So we talk about consistency in design all the time. I think the phrase is consistency is the hobgoblin of simple minds is a phrase, which I like to say, which is you can't always have consistency for consistency's sake. It's the same. You shouldn't have AI for AI's sake. And I think a lot of what Ben was talking about in the first phase is, are we aligning this to business outcomes and user outcomes? Is this meaningful? Well, we want to make sure that we're being consistent in this case, not just for consistency's sake, but because it's going to create trust and credibility. And so if you have multiple agents or different AI experiences, you need to kind of create a framework. And that can be as simple as all of, Ben mentioned icons. We're going to use the same icon or the same color, or we're going to use the same affordances or interface elements whenever a human is interacting with AI to make it very, very clear. And you might go as far as taking part of your design system and ship, and you'll have to update your design system for AI integration. But are you able to maybe create a different visual modality so people get into that mindset where they're doing that? And then you're kind of consistent throughout. What's happening in a lot of tools is it's getting sort of like, placed here and there and elsewhere, and it's not really cohesively or consistently thought of. And these are really good opportunities for research, even in the design phase, to put a prototype together and then validate it with users. And do people view it positively? What potentially is going wrong? Has there been, are you measuring trust and credibility before this? Do you have a baseline before you integrate these AI features? Is that going down? All of the measurables that are important if we're rebuilding a workflow in a business tool are just as valid if you're integrating AI. And so you need to measure those early and then measure them as you're putting these features out and testing them in both qualitative and quantitative ways. Yes, it's great if you can have a trust and credibility quant metric that you're always referring to. Probably not always realistic. So what you want to do is look at, can we do some qualitative research and get feedback? And basically, do people understand, do users understand why the AI is making the decisions that it's made? They might not want to dive into it in the moment, but they'll want to know the background of it. Okay, so just some best practices here. Plain language. Make sure that what's coming out of the AI and how you're describing that is in plain language and not jargony. Always explain next steps. We break down the AI integration journey when we're doing workshops into pre-AI, during AI, and post-AI. And so you actually want to understand, like, how's somebody getting into this flow? What is their state of the tool before? Okay, now I'm doing the interactions with it. And then what happens after? And it's really around like successful and unsuccessful iterative loops. I think a lot of designers and product folks really focus on that middle lane, which is on the agentic back and forth, or setting up the chat, Gen AI back and forth, or setting up an agent. But it's really like a change to the experience before and after. And you need to ensure there's actionable next steps. And then I already talked about this one, which is extending your design system. Be very conscious of this. Make very explicit decisions. If you're having trouble convincing someone to shift I don't know, maybe you're changing the icon colors as maybe a bad example, but icon colors as you're going to integrate AI, and somebody's like, oh, we have to have consistency in the design system. I think even from a sales perspective, people will like that. There's ways to pitch that as, hey, this is like our AI enabled feature set, but it's also, in that case, good for sales. I think it's good for users. So just some actionable best practices. And then these are some examples from Team Fuzzy Math. I covered some of these, but we're working with an agentic AI startup, and it's multiple kind of step workflow. And I think bringing them along for that and showing the reasoning throughout and the ability to move back in time and forward, and ensuring that the features are opt-in is all about agency. I talked about visual consistency and showing that there's sort of confidence levels. Did this with an AI startup that was processing reams and reams of data, and they were integrating agentic AI for the first time. And it was taking, a bunch of steps away from the workflow from humans. And then it was actually hiding them in the first round that we were doing from a design perspective. And that felt really jarring for people. So we actually kept them in the loop maybe more than they needed to do, but it created a consistency with pre-AI and post-AI. And then we gave them confidence levels of the data, and then they could validate that on their own. And that builds trust. And then transparency. So this is just clarifying where data sources are, error states, error prevention, and then just keeping things really streamlined so it's clear where they are in a process, whether data is AI generated or not AI generated. And all of these from a design perspective, frankly, work pretty well together. And then just some insights. This is about the CX industry. For the first time, those CX scores dropped across effectiveness, ease, and emotional connection. And there were a bunch of drivers in CX: long waits, transfers, repeating information. This isn't to say that this is an AI problem, but if you're integrating AI in certain tools, you need to be aware that there's an erosion in trust and credibility, and that these UX breakdowns will kind of only cause it worse if you start to inject a tool that's doing thing in place of human-to-human contact. I think sometimes people want that ease of interacting with data source tool like a Gen AI tool versus talking to a human, but it creates this gap where when it breaks, it really, really, really breaks. So remember your core sort of principles of transparency, agency, consistency, and error handling. And I'm going to hand it back over to Ben for the last set of heuristics.
Yeah, these are the last three in the deliver and drive phase. So once something's out in the wild, then how do you make sure that it's going to be successful over time? So we can move forward to the first one is AI is supported through ongoing monitor and maintenance. It is not set it and forget it, which I think is from my childhood infomercial. Is there a clear plan in place for monitoring AI performance post launch? This is the chance for our anxieties as designers or my personal ones to kind of come out and say, what happens if the AI doesn't work? What happens if the users don't like this as much as we thought? What if something's changing with how often it's working or how the users feel about it? What's the plan for monitoring that? Do we have dashboards? What are the metrics that we set up early on that we're tracking, knowing that there is a plan in place and people responsible for it? Speaking of responsibilities, how will the system be updated as models, data, and business needs change? Who's going to do that? What's the plan for it? What's the process? Models can change all the time. So who's going to monitor that? How are we going to know if it changes? What are all the scary things we can think of with this new thing we just put into the wild? And how are we going to plan to correct them over time? Accountability is a big one in the last bullet point. And as they come up, somebody needs to be responsible for it. I think, for a lot of our projects kind of end at handoff before things go into production. But these are the things we're thinking of for continued success, is tracking baselines, tracking metrics, and making sure that there's a plan, process, and responsibilities in place to make sure that things are successful over time, not just at the start. I'm going to start with 3.2 on the left. Users can easily understand how to use the feature through expected patterns and interactions. We're covered this a lot in the design phase. This is just like core common things that we're working on. But you have to do your validation research. Is there a plan to conduct validation testing with users to understand feature usage? We hope you're doing this early and often before things go into production and make sure that you understand, or at least have a hypothesis of how you think it's going to go, and then make sure that you're doing that before launch and then after launch on a recurring basis and tracking against a baseline of understanding things good, things bad, things trending up or down, and moving forward from there. Are there resources to support continual iteration and design improvements? Same vibe, making sure that there's a plan and a process in place to test this over time. There's more that is kind of out of your team's hands when it comes to AI than in other products and other features. Are users able to provide feedback on AI outputs, and does the system adapt based on those user inputs? I think this is fascinating. This is all that human in the loop piece that's just critically important for any AI enhanced feature. For one of our engagements with the AI startup, we just spent a good chunk of time over a couple of weeks just concepting how human beings can give feedback to an agentic workflow after it completes. And so there's like simple ideas like the thumbs up, this is the right answer, thumbs down, this isn't quite right. But also getting into, did the process the agent followed, is that correct? Is that the right process based on our business rules? And you could handle that with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But we were playing around with concepts of pointing the AI to a different database or a different table or a different field in a form, or pulling up a PDF and saying, no, the actual value's over here. The PDF is kind of weird, of like where labels and data are showing up. So there's light ways to do this and heavy ways to do this. And there's a lot of different levers you can pull, but critically important of how a human can provide value back to the AI so the AI gets better over time. Super fun stuff. 3.3, there are processes in place to ensure the safe and responsible use of AI over time. What happens if people start using this in ways that you didn't expect or intend? Who's going to know about it? Who's going to be responsible to fix it? How are you going to deal with those situations? All of these kind of out of your control things can happen. So you have to have a plan in place. You have to think through the risks of failure modes ahead of time so that you don't get caught off guard and have to react to these in real time. But just kind of thinking of, for each step of the way, what's the worst case and less than worst case that can happen, and how are we going to deal with those things? The trust issue, I was talking about the eye that you can click on and see the calculations. Do users receive clear warnings or guidance when something is like uncertain or missing or limited? Thinking through ways that design can kind of help support that trust and say, hey, this thing happened, or here's a warning, or here's a FYI in the interface to really let people know that something changed or is different or is missing in the moment, and they can really understand the status of the system. And then I already talked about the last bullet of preventing and flagging irresponsible use of AI. Just, who's going to know what's the plan, what's the process, how you're going to correct that, and trying not to do it through these heuristics of doing it after the fact, and instead of trying to be proactive as possible. And with some insights from this phase, using AI as an enablement tool instead of a replacement tool, satisfaction should go up. There's just offloading some stuff, making it easier for me, the human. This is a satisfying experience. AI can help with personalization. More personalized experience are a little bit more, people are more receptive to that. And then reducing burnout of just taking some of these tedious tasks off my plate and allowing somebody else to do it. The machine can do that simple calculation that I don't want to do 100 times a day anymore. So we think of this as an enhancement and just really enabling people, not replacing them as often as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. All right, folks, it sort of wraps up the in-depth review from a discover, design, deliver, and drive perspective. So just some key takeaways. Again, we really are focused as a firm and focused with our clients on delivering like business value. And so that value is really only possible if people trust the solutions. And I think people pay attention to delivering trustworthy solutions, but I think the rush to AI and the rush to deliver AI quickly, people sort of forget about it and they don't actually spend as much time and energy thinking about it. And that's not only bad and tough for users who are using these tools or customers. It translates into, low feature adoption and people maybe viewing the rest of the tool as untrustworthy. If you have this established piece of software and you move too quickly into AI and you lose that trust and credibility you've built up with your customers, I don't know, for 15 years, that's bad, and that can erode really, really quickly. And if you're trying to get out of the gate with a new product and it's AI enabled or it's all about AI, you need to have the same level of attention to detail to trust, because you're trying to win people over and show that it's not just a gag. It's not just an extra feature. You didn't take something else and just call it AI. It's actually a meaningful usage. So, we see the heuristics as a framework. That's what they are. And if you follow these, they can help deliver more trust, which delivers more adoption, and that has impact for the top and bottom line, which is really about the business value that comes from trust. So we encourage you to, use the takeaway and review it. I would say if you have any questions for me and Ben, you can reach out to us or use the comments if you're watching the recording of this, or if you're live now, we'll pause in a minute for some questions. We have one or two and kind of from DMs that we'll cover. But really think about this as a framework for your team, for you as a designer, product manager, product owner, engineer, not just as nice to have, but something you can use as a tool moving forward. And this is where we're going to pause and just say thank you. Anyone who's registered for this event or who's watching this live, we'll get a copy of a PDF of the heuristics, and you can read those through. And as I said, the good thing about LinkedIn live events, that we're on YouTube as well. It's the same. You can add comments at any time. It could be a year if you're watching this. Maybe it's too early in the AI journey for yourself or your organization, but you eventually get there. These heuristics are meant to be best practices, and we might adjust them over time, the more work we do or the feedback we get. But they are meant to be sort of timeless in that you could start with it in your next call, or it could be 6 months before you need them. We generate a decent amount of content on AI. Obviously, we're doing this webinar, this live webinar on trust in AI. I host a podcast called UX Leadership by Design. Hint, that's why it's security by design. There's sort of a little bit of a connection there in theme. And some of my most popular episodes are around AI. Even if I avoided those conversations early, or kind of wasn't sure where we were going to go, people have had really amazing things to say about their journey with AI and delivering AI-enabled products. And there's a number of episodes. And then we have some master classes that we do, which are just kind of think of this, but in 5 to 7 minutes, kind of teach you one thing about the design process. One of those is around journey mapping and how to use journey maps specifically to do opportunity identification for AI enablement. And there's on our at Fuzzy Math on YouTube, there's a group of content, a playlist that is all AI themed. So we encourage you to check that out. Ben and I's emails, just Mark and Ben at Fuzzy Math. We have our phone number as well, obviously fuzzymath.com. You can reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn now. We're both active. So if you're not connected to us, if you're a second or third connection, please send a connection request. We would love to connect with you. We'd love to hear about your AI journey as it continues, or maybe it's just starting. But in the remainder of the next few minutes, we'd love to answer a few questions if people have them. So please feel free to use the comments. If you're watching live, great. If you're watching a recording, please send a comment. I promise you, I will. Ben and I will respond to it. We had one in the background, and Ben, I'll throw it. Or actually, maybe I'll handle this one, and then I'm going to ask my question I had for you before. This was, how do you recommend teams start using the AI trust and credibility heuristics in their day-to-day work? Should they be applied at the beginning of a project or more as an evolutionary step? I think the answer is both. I think you should look at these before you start a project. Maybe it's a new work stream or feature or a set of backlog items that you're going to tackle. Or maybe, listen, you're going through and you're going to be doing an AI-enabled feature. Ask yourself these questions, regardless of your role. Ask them of your team, introduce them, and then that's a proactive way to get around the trust and credibility issues. And then the reactive way, which is still okay, is to evaluate the work that you've done based on the heuristics. But Ben, any additional thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think I was just having a conversation of the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now. I feel like that applies here of, use these at the beginning if you can. And if you're not at the beginning, start using them today. I think there's no, there's benefit to having them at the start, but there's absolutely no downside of just using them as you can and find the ones that make sense for today. Ask them to yourself, ask them of your other teammates, and move forward with a little bit more information.
All right, I'm going to stay on you, Ben. This was a question I thought of, which I think we get a lot. The first part of our process as designers, product strategists, is aligning around business data and KPIs and ensuring you have some that measure trust and credibility. What do you do if you're in an organization and you're not really freely getting that information? And it sounds like in certain cases with recent clients that you've been working on, like they've had those metrics in mind, or maybe did you guys explore those during workshops and kind of come up with something together? So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Sometimes it's just here. It's like, this is our goal. This is, black and white. This is where we're going, and, get aligned behind it. It's like, that's great. That's easy. That is usually not how it works. Usually we're doing workshops at the beginning and trying to tug on threads and really understand, where do you want to go? What are some differentiators that you have? It's a mixture of our kickoff workshops with the team of stakeholders, follow-up interviews, like stakeholder interviews, one-on-one, where we're kind of talking about, all right, what's the purpose of your department? What's your point of view? What does success criteria look like to you? I had a really fun example of, we ask all these questions on every project, and usually we get there. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's not. For one engagement like 2 years ago, we had some in mind that we got through the kickoff that the team was like, yeah, that's where we're going. And through the design process, we were presenting like an onboarding workflow, creating an account. And our main stakeholder, who we've talked to so many times, kind of said, this is critical for us because the more people that get to this point in the process is the kind of how we make money. It's just like, we've never heard this before. Hitting that button is like the single most important part for like funding for the org. And they're like, yeah. And it was like, sometimes we just don't get it. And I think we're being clear. I think we're doing a good job asking for it. But sometimes it just kind of comes up. But, having a way to ask the questions, doing it individually, doing it as a group, making sure different people hear it, which is a lot of where these heuristics are coming from. Making sure people with different points of view are having the same conversation at the same time is just critically important to success and getting aligned, moving forward together. The more metrics we can have at the beginning is great, but sometimes it's a circuitous journey to get them.
Most things are that circuitous journey. Okay, Ben, thank you for joining me today and presenting and sharing your client experiences. Folks, thanks for joining us. We're going to wrap it up now, but this content lives on. So if you do have comments or questions, please let us know. If you're watching this and you haven't received the copy of your your 11 AI trust and credibility heuristics, just message trust in the comments. I will follow those. I promise I will monitor them, and I will reach out to you directly and make sure you have a copy of those. But thanks again for your time and energy and questions. We very much appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.